All right, everyone. Welcome to Brandon at Random Reviews. I am your host, Brandon Griffiths. For those of you that are not familiar with the special trading ratings format, this is the basic premise. For each episode, we will pick one director, actor, character, subject, something along those lines, a unifying theme, and each of us will rate 6 of their major movies on a scale of E being the worst, going all the way up, DCBA to S, which is the absolute best rating that we can give. It's like the top tier. We just agree on the movies going in and then talk about them in a set order, and that's just how we do it. So Dan and I will go back and forth talking about how we feel about the movies, our different thoughts about it, and then we will give our rating. I'll let Dan kind of explain what our topic is for this series of episodes.
So this time we're going to talk about quintessential 90s comedies. And you might be asking yourself, well, what is a quintessential 90s comedy? What does that mean? Does that mean movies that defined the decade? Does it mean movies that reflect or represent the decade? Does it mean movies that would have only worked in the decade, and if they were made 10 years earlier or 10 years later, they wouldn't have clicked as well or the same if you didn't like it? Or are they just movies we associate with the 90s for some reason? Kind of going further than that, even in my mind, as we put the list together, was like, how do you define quote unquote the 90s? Is it any movie that is made between January 1st, 1990 to December 31st, 1999? Or is it more of from a cultural or pop culture perspective? You could argue that the 90s really didn't start on January 1st, 1990, right? Especially if a movie came out in January that year, was probably filmed in the 80s, technically, right? That kind of thing. And what do you think of when you think of the 90s? In my mind, the 90s starting point is really more in 1991, especially with like Nirvana's Nevermind. That's where kind of it feels like it really switched from an 80s aesthetic to like something more associated with the 90s, with grunge, or not so much the color schemes, because obviously, Nirvana wasn't wearing bright teal and purples that I associate with the 90s, but like the 90s kind of start more in like 91-ish. And then similarly, they don't necessarily end December 31st, 1999. It feels like, again, culturally, the 90s didn't really, we didn't really come out of it probably until like, maybe even September 11th of, 2001, where everything changed. So that's kind of where I was in my head of trying to define where these movies fit in. And then I really wanted to focus on like, how do these relate to my experience of the 90s, right? I was 8 years old when they started. I was 18 years old when they ended. So really like the 90s defined my entire adolescence and teenage years. I was kind of an 80s kid, but really I don't remember much of the 80s, right? If I'm really honest with myself, I'm much more, my brain thinks 90s. So anyway, that's my kind of intro spiel. With that, do you want to just jump into the first one or give a preview of the 6 that we're going to be talking about?
I guess, we'll keep it mysterious just for fun's sake. And the first movie that we're going to talk about is called Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead from 1991. It stars Christina Applegate and others, is what I put. Like, there aren't really, there are names that, like, there's faces I recognize and stuff, but I'm like, I don't, like, none of these names are, like, really, like, household names at all, aside from her, so.
Or David Duchovny, I guess, it plays a small supporting role.
Right. Yeah, he pops up out of nowhere.
But yeah, I had to say he's starring Christina Applegate, and that was all I.
That's where
the
you
main star.
Right. This one, like, I just remember watching when I was little. I found out today that it was actually written by a teenager. Like, it was a really young guy. He's still a writer, but like he wrote this when he was still a teenager, and it's like it was such like the ultimate kid fantasy movie of like mom leaves home, the babysitter's not there. It's like, what are we gonna do? What ridiculous things could we come up with to do in this time with no supervision whatsoever. They just fucking go wild. And I feel like most people I talk to when I talk about this movie, like I always get like a strong reaction. Like they're like, oh, like yes, like that movie. Like I don't,
Yeah, right,
it's
right.
just like, I mean, like, because it's just ridiculous. Like starting with the title. I mean, it's a ridiculous title for a movie, but I mean, it's funny. You know, it's a good concept, but
I did not know that bit about it was written by a teenager. That actually kind of surprises me because it seems the parts with her in the professional world and stuff like that actually.
I guess the guy was actually like he was getting into the fashion industry, and that's like where he pulled
Okay.
most. So
Okay.
it made, that would make more sense, I guess.
So getting into kind of the, again, relating it to our theme here, the 90s. So this is the one that upon rewatching, I'm not sure that I would think of this as a 90s movie. It did come out, establishing my previous, start of the cultural 90s, which is completely and utterly subjective, right? But it did come out before Nevermind. It predated that. The clothes they wear, the way they talk and everything definitely feels more 80s. It looks like an 80s movie to me. Having said that, I did really think that the opening sequence felt very 90s. The cartoon sequence, and there was a lot of teals and purples. And then later in the movie, when she, becomes like the fashion mogul kind of whatever person, I felt like those were very kind of progressively 90s looks. Even if like her brother felt like something out of a very cliche 80s movie, right? With his, even the Twisted Sister and 80s music references. He had like 80s metal posters on his wall. Like it felt very 80s to me, with the exception of that fashion piece, which was part of the plot.
Definitely the first note I had was, this is the very first thing I thought of when I was watching the movie. It's a very 80s, 90s movie, but I mean, it's 91, so it only makes sense.
And it really does straddle the inflection point there between the 80s and 90s. As we said, like that with some of those fashions and the colors, again, during that opening sequence felt very 90s to me. So who knows? Maybe that's where some of them took off. I don't know. I'm not a cultural expert, but I definitely saw tones of both in the movie. As far as the movie itself went, it was the first time I've watched it in probably 20, close to 30 years, honestly. So I remember, as you mentioned, like, when you said, let's include this one, I was like, oh God, I remember that movie. It was so funny. It was not as laugh out loud funny as I remember it being as a kid. Definitely. It felt almost more of a drama at times than a true comedy. I did one of the things that I wrote down right in the beginning when they showed her mom, and somebody said she was 37. I was like, oh my God, parents look old back then. Now, granted, she was 46 in real life, the actress that played the mom. But when she said 37, I was like, are they like being sarcastic, or is she supposed to be a 37-year-old mom right here?
It is really like, it's crazy to think about. Like, I mean, that like, how old did they seem? The adults in this movie seem so much older, and it's like, that they're really supposed to be 30s, 40s, like at the oldest, and it's like, holy shit. On a similar, so Christina Applegate, I know, like, huge, Married with Children, they were doing the woo every time she showed up on screen, and it was like,
she was huge at the time when this came out. She was 100%. If you look at like IMDb, if somebody has upcoming projects, and you'll see like upcoming Christina Applegate project, this feels like it was pulled out of a bin somewhere, the script, as like, here's something we can put Christina Applegate in and make $100 million. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Like it feels like they found something for her, not the other way around. Like they didn't go searching for the perfect star. Like this was a Christina Applegate engine.
Right. I would agree with that. It seems, because I mean, it is. You probably weren't old enough. I definitely wasn't old enough that it was like Christina Applegate was like the it girl yet, because we were just, I mean, you were what? 8? I mean,
she definitely was the it girl right before I would have been cognizant of an it girl, or you know what I mean? Like she was just ahead of that for me. Not that, I wouldn't have known by the time I was a teenager that Christina Applegate was hot stuff, because it's not like she just disappeared when I turned 13 or anything. But she was the hot stuff for like probably my brother's age, who's 5 years older than me.
Right. That's why I was thinking, I'm like, this had to be so many teenage guys' dream movie. Like they just were so excited. So, like, I don't know. I mean, like, we talked about her brother, who is like he must be barely younger than her. I don't remember if they say how old he was in this movie, but then there's like these other, like, there's so many more kids than I remember in this movie, in this family. Like, you've got,
Right.
like, my favorite by far is this middle child, the brother that is like, he has that hairstyle. He looks like Leo in Titanic and Edward Furlong in Terminator 2, and like
The floppy hair curtains.
yeah, and it's just like, this was such a fucking hairstyle for the whole 90s. It was like, it's like Joey on Friends. Like, when he first started, he had his hair just dangling all over the place and stuff, and it's like, holy fuck.
Yeah,
like,
you know, like in any era, you can look back on it and be like, oh my God, that was an embarrassing trend. You know, like I feel like the 70s had their elephant bell bottoms, you know, that were ridiculous in retrospect, that were, you know, plaid and whatever. For the 90s, I feel like it's those haircuts.
Yes.
Like, people have to look back at their 90s haircuts and be like, what was I thinking? You know, that frosted tips and floppy hair curtains, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the 80s was no better. I mean, yeah, it's wild.
The giant perms.
Right. That's like probably like, as I was watching, like the biggest indicator of like, that is so 90s. Like, it's ridiculous. But like, the actual plot of this movie, I forget that you really even experienced the babysitter early on. I kind of was feeling like she was gone even quicker than she was in this movie.
I felt the same way. I didn't remember how quickly she's in and out. It felt like it was 45 seconds. This mean, nasty old lady shows up, and 30 seconds later, they discover she's dead and get on with it, which honestly is probably for the better, because nobody would have wanted to sit there through 10 minutes of, you know, the babysitter.
That's my awesome trivia thing. Apparently, they were going to make the first 20 minutes of this movie be like a murder mystery type thing, where they try and figure out how the babysitter died. They were just like, yeah, get that the fuck out of here. Like, we don't need anything to do with that. Right.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. She's old, she's dead. Let's get on with the fun, right?
It's like, can you imagine, like, you're in this situation and your babysitter dies, and you actually, I know it's a movie, but they fucking throw this lady in like an old trunk and drop her off at the mortuary, like the crematorium or whatever, and just leave a note. What are we doing here?
You'd think that, you know, there would have been some sort of police detective work going on. Like, who is this lady? How did she die? Where did she come from? Did somebody murder her and drop her off here? Like,
right.
Yeah, the only other note that I had was $50,000 for the fashion show that apparently they paid for with petty cash. I don't know about you, but I don't think I've ever worked in an office that had 50 grand in 1991 dollars in petty cash in a drawer.
Like, holy shit. I estimate that to be like $2.6 million by today's standards. Like, that's fucking insane.
Yeah. Usually there's like, you know, $100 in case you need to, you know, emergency coffee run or something, right? Or office supplies. Somebody needs to run down and get a stapler because the stapler broke, right?
Right. Yeah. I don't think I've ever actually used petty cash. I think I've worked in an office that did, but like, I never had reason. I'm watching this. I'm like, there's no fucking way that's how petty cash is going down. Like, they just would not have that much flowing in and out of it all the time.
Tens of thousands of dollars in petty cash. Yeah, probably not. But I don't know. I don't work in the fashion industry, so maybe that's true. Maybe the guy who wrote it worked in an office where they had $50,000 in petty cash in the drawer.
I mean, just a couple of things. I'll kind of fly through them. Like, so the 90s technology I absolutely love in this one. Like, you get the fax machine, copy machine. You get that
stereo system.
The kids order the stereo system, and it's like, it's got like a less than 20-inch TV on the top of it, and it is like the state of the art technology, you know. And, oh my God, I couldn't give that away right now unless I found somebody that was like really into old technology. But like
the massive CD disc changer, though, like to me, I feel like that is quintessential 90s premium entertainment center technology, right?
Yes. Yeah. I always remember I was like fascinated because I didn't have one of those until I was a decent amount older. When I saw those, I was like, holy shit, this is amazing. You can listen to that many CDs in rotation.
Yep.
Like you don't have to do anything. Like,
Yeah, remember the disc changers in the trunks of cars? Like, you can
oh
hold
my
5
God.
CDs in your trunk. But
Right.
if you wanted to change them out, you had to pull over and open the trunk and change them, which seems so absurd now. But it was like, man, I got a 5 disc changer in the trunk, man. I got it made.
Yeah. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
kids these days would be like, wait, what? What did you have to do?
And like this is like, it's a perfect example of casual ripped jeans everywhere. And that was, to me, definitely like early 90s, and then like late 90s became like Jinkos and like
yeah.
things
Well,
like that.
I feel like mid 90s was Jinkos for me because it was middle school is when I had a pair.
Oh,
and by the way, we'll get to that.
Right. Fair enough.
Yeah. Ripped up jeans, though, definitely feels like something that carried across, because whether it was like 80s hair metal or like 90s grunge, ripped up jeans were like an essential part of that outfit, right? So I don't have a whole lot else to say about this one. Like I said, it ended up, as I watched it, with the few exceptions we talked about, it felt very much more 80s to me. It wasn't as, like I said, it wasn't as laugh out loud funny as I remembered it being, though I did think it was still a good movie. And the scenes, especially with like the kids versus adults, and they kind of flipped their roles, I thought was pretty funny. But overall, my grade for it, watching it again for the first time 30 years later, I gave it a C.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I don't think I'd seek it out to watch it again necessarily.
The one note I did want to make, because I know that you'll absolutely love this, the script was actually written with Winona Ryder in mind.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I could see that. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it's...
Because this would have been right around the Beetlejuice era where she played the teenage girl in Beetlejuice. I could totally see her.
Yeah, and I think the reason she didn't do it was, I think, maybe like Edward Scissorhands. Like, that was why.
Okay.
I think that was 90 or 91.
Well,
but
I think Christina Applegate was perfect for it, so.
Yeah, I do. I agree. I give this one a B. I still hold it pretty near and dear, but like it's got its flaws. I mean, it's just... I still enjoy it, and I know I'll go back and revisit personally, but like it's just really, to me, I still find it to be fun, and just I'm never going to enjoy it as much as I did when I first saw it, because you know, it's just I can't go back there, but so
this is one I feel like has not aged that well, in my personal opinion. Not in terms of like they were doing stuff that you couldn't get away with now or anything, because that'll pop up in a couple of these later ones too.
Right.
But it just, I don't know, it felt kind of dated to me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean,
I would think if a kid watched it today, they would be bored.
Oh, absolutely. They wouldn't even understand what a lot of stuff was going on, but. So yeah, that is Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. And so next time on Trading Ratings, we'll be talking about a movie that I'll probably tease in the graphic that follows me talking right now. So have a good rest of your day. Bye now. Brandon at Random Reviews artwork, theme music, and podcast are written, performed, recorded, engineered, directed, and produced by Brandon Griffiths in association with Brandon at Random Reviews Entertainment.